Lord Vader, Lord Vader, can you hear me? These were the words to claw their way through the haze of his consciousness. They came distorted, warped as if whispered from beneath an ocean. The voice was both familiar and foreign, soothing and venomous. It didn't matter because the sound itself hurt. Every vibration sent needles of fire through his skull, stabbing at senses that no longer seemed his own. He tried to open his eyes. Nothing. Darkness. Not the comforting dark of sleep, not the meditative calm of closing one's eyes. This was a suffocating dark. A dark that pressed down on him like weight, like gravity, like the galaxy itself had collapsed upon him. And then breathe. Not his own. A rasp, mechanical and cold, dragging in air with all the grace of a dying animal. It was the loudest thing in existence. In, out, a hiss, a growl, each cycle tearing through his awareness like the steady toll of a funeral bell. He realized with a slow and dawning horror that it was not coming from around him, it was coming from him. Something inside him. No, something that had replaced him was breathing for him. Memory returned like shards of glass. Fire, screams, sand turned to molten glass. A blade of blue light above him, his brother's voice trembling with sorrow and rage. You were the chosen one. And then pain. Unending, unyielding pain that had devoured him until he thought there would be nothing left to feel. He had begged her name as the blunt burned away. Padme. Her face had been the last thing he had seen before the flames claimed him. Was this death? No. Death would have been kind. This was something else. A voice slithered back into his awareness. Lord Vader, rise. Rise. He tried to move. And for a moment, he thought he had failed, because the thing beneath him didn't feel like him. It was slow, clumsy, and groaned with the sound of servos grinding against metal. Every gesture felt borrowed, like his mind was piloting a corpse. Finally, the weight of his torso lifted from the table, and the table itself groaned back as though it resented him for surviving. Shapes began to form in his vision. Not real shapes, not colors as he remembered them. The words appeared filtered, stripped of warmth, every edge sharp and exaggerated. The brightness burned his eyes, though he knew it was dim. What had they done to him? His body was a map of agony. Every inch screamed. Some screams were sharp, like knives twisting in his muscles. Others were dull, like iron weights dragging his bones into the abyss. And beneath it all there was a deeper pain, a hollow aching absence where limbs should have been. He willed his left hand to move. Something clattered. Fingers of metal, unfamiliar and heavy, responded, but not as he intended. The hand flexed with all the subtlety of a hammer, clunky and imprecise. His right leg. Nothing. Then a delay, a shudder, and a weighted thud against the floor that didn't even feel like a step. Panic slithered into his chest. Was this permanent? Was this him? He reached for the force, desperate for the familiar surge of power, the tide that had always obeyed his call. But it didn't feel the same. It was there, vast, dark, and violent. but it was no longer a song. It was a storm, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he was commanding it or if it was laughing at him. The voice returned. "You are strong, you are whole, you are mine." The realization landed with the weight of a starship. Palpatine, his master, the man who had promised him salvation, promised him power, promised him a way to save her. And yet, where is Padme? The words weren't words at all, but a distorted growl that rattled through the speakers in his mask. He could barely recognize the sound as his own voice. The answer came soft, almost kind. It seems
in your anger, you killed her.
The storm inside him exploded. No, that wasn't possible. He had done all of this for her. He had torn apart the Jedi, he slaughtered children. He had burned the galaxy just to hold her in his arms again. And now the medical droid screamed before he even realized he was moving. Metal crumbled. Glass shattered, the operating table buckled under the invisible weight of his fury. Walls trembled as instruments and machinery were flung like leaves in a storm. And through it all, that breathing, his breathing, roared like a beast unleashed. In, out, hiss, growl. His grief didn't consume him. He forged him. In that moment, Anakin Skywalker burned away for the final time.
I felt it.
All that remained was Darth Vader. But even as his rage threatened to tear the room apart, something far colder slithered beneath it. Resolve. If she was gone, then so too was the man who had loved her. And if that man was dead, then this new being would serve a single purpose. To never be weak again. To never lose again. He turned his head towards the silhouette watching him from the shadows. Palpatine didn't flinch at the destruction. He didn't raise a hand to defend himself. He simply smiled. Every lesson as a Sith, everything he had suffered had been intentional. The pain, the armor, the loss, all of it designed not just to break him, but to bind him forever. And yet somewhere, deep inside beneath the metal and the rage, a single thought whispered like an ember refusing to die. One day I will destroy you, but not today. Today he would serve. Today he would learn. And today was only the first day of Darth Vader's first year as the Dark Lord of the Sith. The first hours after his awakening were not triumph. They were study of the person he now inhabited. And at first, he did not even understand that it was a prison. He thought it was simply his body. But as he listened, and as he breathed, as he stepped, the truth carved itself into him with every step. This was not life. This was a design, and it had been designed to hurt. The suit was heavy, though not in the way of armor. It was heavy like regret, heavy like obligation, pressing him forward, forcing him to bend. His boots were weighted in their heels, pitching him slightly towards the ground so that every stride felt like walking uphill through mud. The joints squeaked, just faintly, but loud enough that he could never forget they were there. Each motion of his arms were deliberate, mechanical, never natural. The right arm, the one he had lost years before, felt almost trustworthy. It moved with crisp obedience, as though it remembered the rhythm of his old cybernetic limb. Crisp obedience, as though it remembered the rhythm of his old cybernetic limb. But the left arm, his new creation, betrayed him constantly. Sometimes it lags, responding seconds too late. Sometimes it spasmed, fingers twitching as though mocking his attempts at control. And though both arms were strong, terrifyingly strong, they lacked the precision he had once taken for granted. Where once he could disassemble a speeder engine blindfolded, now he could barely close his hand around a scalpel without bending the metal. He noticed other flaws, subtler ones designed to gnaw at him over time. The synthetic skin grafted what little flesh remained of him each instantly, as though it rejected every existence. It required constant cleansing, the peeling away of necrotic tissue, a process that stank of rot and acid. The bodysuit that pressed against the fragile layer bunched and snagged, rubbing against his wrists and knees until they blistered beneath the prosthetics. And then there was the mask. It filtered light through a narrow spectrum, but not the way a visor might sharpen one's senses. Instead, it distorted them, forcing him to tilt his entire head just to see his own feet. Peripheral vision was a memory. Every turn of his head was exaggerated, dramatic, as though mocking him for needing to look. The sound design was worse. Palpatine's medical droids had rebuilt the cartilage of his ears, but his eardrums were gone. Now sound arrived through implants, metallic and shallow, as though the galaxy spoke to him from underwater. Too much came in at once. Every hum of electricity, every hiss of hydraulics, every click of distant console, all of it clung to him, echoing, overlapping, impossible to sort. Sometimes his own breathing was so loud in his senses that it drowned out the words those speaking to him. And that breathing, always that breathing, it wasn't just noise, it was punishment. The respirator fed oxygen into his ravaged lungs through tubes drilled directly into his chest, bypassing the very concept of breath. Meaningless beeps, perhaps intentionally meaningless, ensuring he never truly knew if something was wrong. The mask hissed on every intake, growled on every exhale, like the sound of an animal caged inside him. He had not yet discovered the hyperbaric chamber. He could not remove the helmet. There was no escape from the sound of himself, and so sleep became impossible. The few times exhaustion overpowered him, he awoke choking, suffocating in nightmares where he was still burning on Mustafar, his breathing syncing perfectly with the rasp of the mask. Even nourishment was humiliation. He could eat only with a pressurized chamber, face bare and exposed, a process so laborious it hardly seemed worth it. More often he was fed through tubes. Bitter nutrient paste dripped into his mask, or liquid sustenance pumped directly into his veins. Waste disposal was handled through catheters and recyclers. Efficient, yes, but degrading in ways words could not capture. He was not a man who wore armor, he was armor that carried the corpse of a man. And yet, as miserable as it was, the design fascinated him because he understood machines. Machines had purpose. Machines reflected the intent of their creator. And this machine was not built to make him strong, it was built to remind him that he was weak. He suspected almost immediately that this had been deliberate. Grievous had been faster, stronger, deadlier. His cybernetics finally tuned slaughter Jedi by the dozens. Vader's suit, though modelled after that template, was crude in comparison. Slower servos, heavier plating, cheaper alloys that corroded easily in moisture, requiring constant maintenance. Even the sensors in his mask lacked proper discrimination, flooding him with useless data while hiding what actually mattered. Palpatine had ordered this as not as an oversight, but as a lesson, as a chain, and Vader understood the lesson. He was meant to hate it enough to grow beyond it, hate it enough to become something stronger than the machine, but not yet. Not now. Now he was expected to endure. And so he studied every flaw of his prison, memorized every cruel imperfection. One day, he told himself, he would master it. One day, the machine would obey as surely as a lightsaber obeyed its wielder. But for now, each step was a battlefield. In those first 4 weeks after awakening, Darth Vader's greatest mission was learning how to walk like a man again. Palpatine watched all of this with amusement. Sometimes he would visit unannounced, his voice slithering through the air like oil.
"My boy," he would say, "you must embrace the pain. It will make you strong."
Vader never replied. He couldn't. Words felt inadequate.
I am not your failure, Obi-Wan. You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did.